Yeah.
You got anything rolled up for this evening, my friend?
Oh, definitely, definitely,
Cool.
definitely. Let's spark that now.
Same here. And while we do that, go ahead and introduce yourself to our listeners and people that are watching the Chillinois podcast.
What up, Chillinois? What up? What up? What up? It's your boy, the one and only J. R. aka Mr. Cabrini Green. I am Hip Hop Chicago, your favorite advocate activist in the city, fighting for the human rights to everything. But today we switching it up. As most of you know, I'm now J.R. Fleming, social equity owner of a craft grow cultivation license in the state of Illinois and transporter license and partner with an infuser. So that's who I am, social equity owner. I'm an advocate through Hemp for Hoods and Southwest Coalition for Commerce, also known as Southwest Coalition for Cannabis. As most of folks listening know, the last couple of podcasts have been covering issues around Springfield and legislative bills that we're proposing to assist us as social equity folks in this industry. I want to start off by saying, just for the record, I was one of the biggest supporter of the cannabis, the CRTA, Retail Tax Act. Um, Big proponent of that because of the expungement element of that bill, one. And two, I was a firm believer that social equity folks will have a shot at this industry. And what I mean by social equity folks, folks who like me, who was disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs. For those who don't know, I had a lot of charges for cannabis. I grew up in Cabrini Green, and I became an activist, only because I felt like there was a necessity to fight for housing. Activists fighting for education, housing, healthcare. During that process of fighting, I did a lot of marching. And prior to being an activist, an advocate, I was an All-American football player. I busted up my legs. And so there goes the story how I come into cannabis, right? I'm after busting up my legs, tearing an ACL in one knee, ACL, MCL in another knee. I was put on medication that I really didn't agree with, and most of the government who knew me doing my protest days didn't agree with. So I was strung out on opioids, Tramadol, and all of them pain medications that would help athletes like myself deal with the pain as we go on in life. Not playing sports. So when I switched over to medical marijuana, best thing that ever happened to me. Best thing that ever happened to the movement and a lot of folks, right?
Oh yeah.
Less protest, more policy. And so speaking on policy, being an advocate, an activist coming from the world of human rights and advocacy, I thought, cannabis would be easy work. It's something that the state and anything but a dream come true thus far. It was a dream come true to win a license. It's been a nightmare since we had it. And that's only due to legislation and the continual practice of these multi-state operators. So I'm doing press conferences with our folks. We out there, we in Springfield advocating for sensible legislation that would support social equity owners.
And that's a perfect segue. Let's, like I said, I want to give you the floor to talk about, some of those policy points that you feel would be, key to ensuring the success of social equity, as you say. Um, Take it on, man. And I just want to say thanks again for your time tonight.
I mean, thanks for having me. So some of the policies that we're pushing for right off the bat as a craft brewer, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. Chicago and Illinois won't appreciate me if I lied, right? My integrity is everything. So I'm going to shoot it right off the bat. This initial legislation we supported was supposed to give us equity in this industry. In hindsight, once you get to seeing the facts of the matter, um, it should have never been a struggle for us to get 14,000 square foot of canopy, right? And for folks who don't know, I have a cultivation which is a craft grow license. Let me separate the two. I have a craft grow license, and the multi-state operators in this state that are operating for cultivation, they have a cultivation license, and their license allow them for recreational to grow up to 200,000 square foot of canopy. Those who have a medical recreational license, medical cultivation license, their canopy is unlimited because they unlimited canopy. So the average MSO is probably using anywhere from 100,000+ square foot of canopy to cultivate cannabis in the state of Illinois. Meanwhile, on the social equity side, we only have 14,000 square foot. So I want to point out that is a great disparity when you talk about market share in this industry as a cultivator and a craft grower. So we felt like it shouldn't have been a struggle asking the state to allow us 14,000 square foot out the gate, or make it whereas the Illinois Department of Agriculture could decide which companies had the capacity and ability to utilize 14,000 square foot right off the bat. The case being, if you really want us to have equity in this industry, you wouldn't be doing anything as a legislator, a government official, to limit, prohibit, or derail us from maximum profitability. And 14,000 square feet, as you know, Cole, it's a big difference, right? And 5,000. And for the average crop, a big difference of profitability. So we wanted to have effective legislation. 14,000 square foot of canopy is one of the demands. We want uniform badging, right? This is necessary so that folks like myself, who might not have won a license but had previous charges, will have a simpler process to get badged so that they can work in this industry. We want also the dispensary owners, as well as other social equity license winners, have the ability to sell some equity in their company so they can raise the necessary capital to stand up their business. Cannabis is a Schedule I drug on a federal level. Everybody know that. You cannot get a loan from a bank to stand up your cannabis business. So that limits the people in which you can go to for loans, investment, some type of equity in a company or stake in a company if they're going to make such a large investment, and we're talking millions of dollars. So that's another issue we want to address. We don't want the conversation derailed around Delta 8, CBD hemp, and all these other products that are really ancillary opportunities to folks who couldn't get in the cannabis industry. Again, it's another way to get into an industry, not just for recreational purposes, but we say medicinal purposes, right? It's another entry point into an alternative medicine industry that is not controlled by big pharma, right? Or multi-state operators. So we're pushing for legislation that would support cannabis owners, operators, and advocates and standing up their businesses and creating an ecosystem where social equity license winners can thrive.
Hell yeah, man. Hell yeah. Well, thank you for laying that all out. And I'm curious, I've been hearing recent talk about an omnibus. Can you give me like the latest that you know about that and where it stands?
Well, we're told we're going to get some things in this Omnibus Bill that we've been asking for, right? So it's in the process that they're working on it. I would imagine this weekend, with a week left in session, that they, some of the things, and I don't want to, I don't know what's public and what's not public, and I don't want to say something that might hinder or hamper our ability to get this. But I do know that they are working on an omnibus bill that would address these issues and get us to the 14,000 square feet. However, I will say I am disappointed. We sparked this one, right? And I'm from Chicago. Everybody know I just tell it how it is, right? I am disappointed that we couldn't get to the conversation around agency versus commission. And I ain't want, to swap out this for that, right? When you have a majority of social equity license winners, advocates, allies, and organizations who working around the cannabis industry, whether it's plant touching or not, who all agree that there should be an agency in which these 13 various departments that should be, that encompass all of them, right? That rolls them all up into one. One of the simpler terms we use is one plant, one agency, right? Shout out Edie Moore, Chicago Normal, and them for keeping our foot to the fire on that. Big shout out to the Cannabis Oversight Office, CRO, Aaron Johnson, them for supporting our demands for an agency. Shout out to the governor's office. I'm just disappointed that legislators is going to put this on the back burner, right? Again, if we're really trying to make it simpler and easier for social equity folks, to stand up their businesses and to be in compliance, then the agency was the way to go. I think we have a house where I know we have a house working group on cannabis, right? That's cool enough for a commission for me. That's good enough as a commission for me. Let our state legislators figure it out with their various working groups, and then they too can engage the agency, right? I'm just never a big proponent of commission. Hard to get with them. There's just so many issues around that. An agency served us a better purpose, so I'm kind of disappointed that I don't think that's going to make the Omnibus Bill, given the fact that it was a high demand of a lot of social equity folks, right? And if I can speak freely,
Hey man, you can say whatever you want here.
It's sad to know that it's institutions like CBAI, it ain't, no disrespect. It's just what it is. You gotta call it for what it is, When you have an organization or a trade association like them who represent the interests of MSOs, some of which I partner with, so I'm not throwing the MSOs all under the bus. But when you got a trade association like that would vehemently object to the desires and the wishes of social equity folks, one got to begin to question who interests do they represent, and then why do they require so much attention and power over the social equity folks? It's almost like a contradiction to legislators saying they with social equity, and then going against us when we say we want an agency versus a commission, or delaying the process for an agency versus a commission, right? I know this much about politics, right, and politics, which is different. There's what you call politics and politics. Politics is getting the Omnibus Bill done. Politics is taking stuff out of the Omnibus Bill that would be essential to social equity folks. That's the one I don't like. I don't like the politics, right? When you're elected to represent the interests of the people, that's what you're supposed to do. When the people say this is what they want, this is what you're supposed to get done. We done passed the buck since 2019, man. Enough is enough. The time is now. The MSOs had 3 uninterrupted years in a retail market. 3 uninterrupted years of profit sharing amongst multi-state operator, big brand corporations. 3 years uninterrupted by social equity license holders.
And I was going to say longer than 3 years, technically, if you want to talk
Yeah,
about the medical
exactly.
cannabis
The medical.
program. Yeah. So, well, can I ask just curious, what MSOs do you like work with? What companies do you work with?
Well, so I do a lot with Justice Grown.
Okay.
Shout out Lovey and Lovey. They
Yeah,
do a
Cole
lot of.
Eastman's been on our show before.
Okay, shoot, cool. So they some great folks who actually help us. We did a incubator, and that's how I want a cultivation license. Shout out Mr. Lovey, John Lovey, partner Nate Lovey in the team. I felt like it was a match in having working with them. Lovey and Lovey, the law firm, does a lot of civil rights, with cases like John Burge, and he actually sued on behalf of the John Burge victim. So it was a match made in heaven. So Justice Grown, one of the industry biggest consultants for the MSOs, Richard Park. He's a brand by himself. He's not a multi-state operator, but he's a multi-state influencer, right? Particularly in the cannabis industry. He also happens to be my cannabis partner. Shout out him, and he had titles at Verano, Brasco, GTI, Vice President of Cookies Emerging Market. He's been one of the partners behind D33 Rise and Success. So shout out him. Another partner I work with is Cresco Labs. Shout out Charlie. We've been able to do some effective things, particularly around COVID. When COVID first struck in 2020, we requested, Cresco and other MSOs contribute, to assisting people with PPE, right? And the reason for that was that they was making hella profit while everybody had the shelter in place. They was getting the bag, share the wealth. So, shout out them for passing out, what I'm saying, masks, hand sanitizers from the house, and giving out gift cards, right? So we did an incubator with them also, a social equity incubator. We utilized the Illinois Cannabis Education Training Center, you know what I'm saying, to show folks how to apply for license and teach them about the rules and regulations. Recently, just started a conversation with Green Thumbs Industry. Shout out Ben Coble over there and Patrick. So we did a lot of work with them, and I had to shout out Barrington Rutherford and Chima and Michael, who held down the social equity program over at Cresco. So them mostly mainly the companies that I work with in terms of MSOs or did some partnerships in the past with. That actually gave some stuff back to the community. So they did a lot of expungement work. So it was making sure they wasn't just profiting in Chicago, that they was giving back. And besides, Cole, check it out. They chose the wrong neighborhood to relocate to. And that's what I told them. GTI, Cresco, and all of them, like, you guys like chose right by Cabrini Green to open up your headquarters. Like, that's my stumping ground. Like, nothing without us about us is for us, right? You're not going to post up over here in the community and not give back. When we make everybody in the community give back, from Dick Sports and everything, to support the community. So we just wanted to make sure that they had the mindset of supporting the community. They can be doing far more, given their market participation. And one of the things we're working on and with is the dropping the prices for distillate and biomass for infusers and cultivators. So they, until they up and running, they can go to market with some products. So that's been some of the negotiations we've been working on with them. But in terms of all partnerships, everybody can do better, especially when you got that much of a market share. That only a few big companies is sharing. So that's why we demand a lot from them, because they making the most. 1.5 last year, 1.2 the year before. What was it the year before? That like 700 some million.
Yeah, it's a lot of money. It's a lot of money.
That is a lot of money.
And I mean, but if you compare it to Michigan too, Michigan's still.
Go ahead.
I was just going to say Michigan made, I think, more money than we did in the last year, but they don't have they have more operators than we do.
And how much money did they generate?
It's a good question. I don't remember off the top of my head, but I believe it was more. I can do like a quick Google of like Michigan 2022 cannabis sales,
And there are unlimited licenses in Michigan.
I believe so. Yeah. $1.8 billion in adult use sales. And I'm just curious, Illinois cannabis adult use sales for 2022. Do you remember that,
that was
number?
1.5. 1.5.
1.5. So they got 1.8. And yeah, they have unlimited licenses. And they always, we point to Michigan and sometimes Oregon and stuff as a failure. I wanted to ask you, I know you kind of got to get along to get along. It's kind of the story of Illinois, but do you ever feel at odds with like some of the, we were talking about the interests at the beginning of the MSOs at the beginning. Do you feel at odds with their stance on license limitations and at all with that? Because I feel like that is the crux of what we're dealing with right now. Like, you know what I mean?
So initially I was one of the supporters of limited license, right? Because it impacts the valuation.
Because of what?
It might impact the valuation.
Oh, gotcha.
Right. And when you have unlimited license, like when you look at the California market, you have a company like MedMan that when they go tank, that makes everybody leery about investment in the markets, right? Now, like too many licenses or this oversaturation of licenses would create investors exodus, right? Now, that's not the only thing that would cause an investor exodus. And this is why I tend to tell people the state is culpable for a lot of things. Like we have so many grounds for lawsuits, right? One of the grounds is equal protection under the law, legislative intent. They created a policy under the legislative intent that if they limited licenses, right, it would attract investors into this market, right? Because it was a limited license state. I get the MSO pushing that. If you're going to create this program, you have to limit the licenses. That's the only thing that's going to attract investors. Or you're going to end up with a saturation problem like you did in Oregon, Oklahoma, where there's millions of pounds of surplus, right? And so that was the threat. So when you limit the licenses, you then have corruption, right? And now it's publicly known that it was a rigged process, right? The first round, like it was rigged, like the scoring was unexplainable. KPMFG, I forget the name of the group, KPMFG, right?
APMG, yeah.
Yeah, so you ask them, how does somebody who manages the scoring process win a license? Or
Right.
do it look like unethical? Do it look like corruption? And because the state gave them the contract, investors saw this, they saw the lawsuits, and they hightailed it the hell out of Illinois, which then adversely caused a problem for the social equity license holders, right? I told folks, at one point I was like, you know what? Let's file a federal lawsuit, right? Let's file another lawsuit, right? Let's get an injunction on the state tax revenue, right? Let's show them how serious we are, right? Get an injunction on the state tax revenue and make them make it where they can't spend no money until they address the harm caused to social equity license winners, right? Because you can address that. When the investors left the station and said, okay, let me increase the lending opportunities and grant opportunities for social equity license winners. If we have stand these folks' businesses up, they're going to be able to help us address some of the ills of the communities in which they come from, one. Two, they're going to be a tax-paying business that's generating revenue that is only going to exacerbate the state coffers, right? Like, so their money is only going to grow.
Yeah.
So why wouldn't you financially support this if you want this program to be a success, right?
Well,
why wouldn't you look at the fact that, okay, well, KPMFG, the corruption over there has caused some public distrust, right? Investor distrust. It was my legislative intent for investors to come into this market and support social equity folks. That didn't happen because of lawsuits. That didn't happen because of the alleged corruption at KPMFG. That didn't happen because there wasn't enough clarity, right? So investors were leery to making such a huge investment in us because of the uncertainties with the legislative sessions that had happened, the regulations, and the contradictions around zoning. Here's one of the things, Cole, I think a lot of folks forgot about in the market. That there was township voting dry,
right.
And so folks who want licenses had to find somewhere else to go. Who fault is that?
Yeah.
There were municipalities throughout the state and these counties that didn't even have zoning in place to tell a person who wanted a license where they can actually go.
Yeah.
They didn't have zoning in place at the time of the license win, right? And so because of these snafus, who's at fault?
Were you aware of a competing measure that was filed of this against the CRTA, which I know it didn't gain any traction, but I'm just curious if you're aware of it. The Carol Ammons bill from Urbana. Are you aware of what it was? And
well, I can say she initially was against it. She wanted to put so much more in it. She had a lot of stuff, a lot of things in the bill. In hindsight, we wish we would have added, right? She was one of the biggest proponents who had told me, opponents who had told me I didn't know what I was getting myself into with the CRTA, right?
Yeah.
And I told her I was more focused around the retroactive expungements, the social equity factor, right? And getting this program going so we can get to the market because the MSOs had already had a great head start, with the medical.
What were some of the things that Representative Ammons said that or wanted that you felt were good
I
but
mean,
didn't
right off
make
the
it in?
back, the +1, stopping the +1, stopping the +1,
Okay.
like stopping at +1.
And
Why?
that's for people that are listening, that's the idea that if you already have a medical dispensary, you get another adult use dispensary. Is that what you're talking about?
Yeah, for recreation. That's right.
Cool.
For
Thank you.
recreation. Everybody get a +1. Um, so she had that. She wanted a more detailed, explainable process for social equity. I believe she complained about the veteran part, knowing that that would come back to bite us.
Yeah.
Um, she had a list of things, like her and a couple other legislators. It wasn't just her.
Sure.
Who had told me, I told you so. I told you so.
Yeah.
And I find this out when we filed the lawsuit for we the state. I'm around the scoring and things, and that created the additional 110 licenses. That's when I really realized, like, wow, yeah, we really missed the opportunity here. And Rep. Adams was right. She was
Yeah.
right.
Do you think do you think unlimited license? I know you were just talking about saturation and stuff, but do you think that is something we should have reconsidered?
I mean, again,
Can
I
can
believe
I
if
show
you
you a
do unlimited,
perspective of a Oregon
yes,
or the head of the Oregon guy, and he was talking about what happened, what you just described. So 1 second
go
here.
ahead.
Sounds like a lad. Do you look back at it and think maybe we should have put some caps on production or on the licenses?
You know, my job's not to second guess that. I'm just the administrator. But if you're asking me, I don't think so. Everyone just wanted to be the first in, to have their stake in it, and they were willing to take the risk to be a part of that market. So I don't think that's necessarily bad. And in a control market, they'd be left out. They'd never get that chance.
The left out part. Now, I believe, when we look at these markets, right, I believe you have a point. This is why we work with legislators in the governor's office to add things like and shut out, you know, the folks on the restorative justice committee, right, for being very supportive of it. The governor office and legislators, but I was a proponent and advocate for the 55, right? Um, these 55 these food deserts and things of this nature, right? And I thought that was important because you want to make sure the people at the bottom, had an opportunity to participate. So I believe that as long as we continue to design the licensing around a particular group that's been most harmed by the war on drugs, I think we'll get it right. Because remember, this was created for those disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs.
Right. And I wanted to actually ask you about that because I felt that that was one of the largest shortcomings of the CRTA, which is one of the speeches that Representative Ammons did give, is that it didn't address the actual issue. And by that I mean, hell, if you think about it, for people that aren't from here, their possession limit is 15 grams. If you're caught with more than that, and we've talked to defense attorneys that have had to defend against that, it's like it's still a crime. Like you get in big
Yes, it
trouble.
is. Yeah, yeah, I'm aware. I think that was a big issue that should have been addressed. But again, in hindsight, a lot of folks missed the bus on that one, right? They there's so many loopholes in the law. I'm gonna put this one out publicly, and I know people hate when I do it, but it's the truth of the matter. Illinois have a gifting act, right? Can you Google Illinois gifting
Yeah, no,
for
we've actually
cannabis?
talked about this. The CROO has confirmed that you can gift cannabis on our show. So,
Right. Okay. Okay.
yep, yep.
Right. So
Sorry, were
so
you
so
going to say something else about that though? I was
yeah, yeah,
sorry. I
yeah,
was just
yes, I
gonna.
would. Yeah, that's a way to dispense. I mean, like, if we're gonna keep it real with the people, you look at what they doing in New York. Right now with the T-shirt, the weed is free. That is an act of gifting.
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And folks will say, well, you encouraging illegal. No, that's the law. I don't believe there should be a limitation on how much a medical patient can grow, right? I believe that
Or an
I'm trying to
adult.
position this wrong.
Do you
Right,
think
or a grown person, period,
right?
should be allowed to grow their own product. You let them grow their tomatoes, right?
Right.
So yeah, I'm just trying to figure out like these laws, who are they meant to assist, right? And who are we making happen? Who are we making happy? Let me just try to sit this. Give me 1 second.
You're all good,
I'm
bro.
trying to roll up. I'm trying to roll up.
It's
You're
all good,
trying to
bro.
roll up these phones. There we go.
Yeah.
There we go. I can roll up now.
There's an art to it. There's an art to it.
Yes. 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 So yeah, I would just like there's ways you can do things in this state, and you should be allowed to, right? I think that Illinois just limited the capacity of profitability that we all can have in this market. We're not tapping into consumption the way we should, right? We're not really tapping into our tourist market the way we should. We're not really marketing ourselves as that cannabis friendly city, right? Not when you say the limitation is 15 grams, right? Like that's kind of hard because like if I'm in town for a week, right, in Chicago, you see what I'm saying?
Right. Right.
Or,
Yeah.
or 2 weeks, I want to go grab, and I'm at an Airbnb. I want to go grab all my weed right now and take it to the Airbnb, right?
Mm-hmm.
And just have it in the crib. So yeah, I think it's some things in the law that we really need to work on.
Yeah.
That possession is real, and like one of the biggest one is just smelling of weed. Like I don't want them pushing that to the side. The
Right.
police can pull you over because they smell cannabis. Well, that's going to be their excuse for everything, right?
Mm-hmm. And
Was it cannabis or CBD?
right.
Was it hemp or weed? Do you have a tester? Can you
And
test the air to see if it was cannabis?
it's just crazy because for folks that are listening, it's not even a question of whether or not whether or not it's a crime. If they claim they smell weed, and so this is the example I like to give, and I got it from a defense attorney, so I'm not going to say that I made it up or anything, but you get pulled over and a cop asks, hey, do you have weed on you? And because it's legal, you're just like, yeah, yes, I do happen to. And then he goes, yeah, I could smell it.
Yeah.
Right. That's how it starts. And that's a crime, by the way. I believe it's a class C
It's
misdemeanor.
Yes, it is. It's entrapment. Yeah, and it's like, it's the contradiction of the law. Because if you look at the CRTA, it says that it is like the least punishable offense. Like, this is not what law enforcement is supposed to be focusing on, right?
Right.
This is
And
not what they're supposed to be keying on.
I want to show you to your point here. I'm going to prove your point here. The first sentence of the CRTA is in the interest of allowing law enforcement to focus on violent and property crimes. That's just look what you said. That's the first sentence of the law.
That's why I mentioned it. That's about the only thing me and Am agreed on. Like, hey, look, these people will ignore every line in that law to make it work against their benefit. But like I said, I'm disappointed that for us to be so progressive, that we seem lost in our responsibilities to create effective legislation, right, that could redress and address,
but
this continual war on drugs, the continued war on drugs.
What did you think was progressive about our approach, though? Like on paper, was it
The
just the idea?
expungement, the expungement, and on paper, social equity participation in this market.
Okay. I'd really one thing I think we would agree on, that I'm glad you just said it distinctly as different, so I know we already agree on it. But I just wanted to say that the governor sometimes, and I've heard other people say that like expungements are a form of social equity, right? You've heard him say that.
Yeah, but I don't. No, that's that. Now we can agree to disagree on that one, right?
What I just want to say is that
expungement,
expungements, they're just literally acknowledging that the previous crime is no longer illegal. I don't think it's a form of
right,
social equity. Like,
right. I think it's a redress of the
correct.
war on drugs. It's not social equity. You don't mix the two.
There you go.
Equity is the participation in, right? Having a percentage of, right? And that's one of the things that I was disappointed about. You know, I spent a lot of years working with the University of Virginia after the big alt left and alt right fight, because the residents of Charlottesville do not call it a race riot. It was not. It was an alt left versus alt right fight, right? So I spent a lot of years down there afterwards working with the University of Virginia to create an equity center to redress and address, right, some of the historic racist practices at the university, you know, which is the biggest landowner in Virginia. And did a hell of a job. Brookings, to all of us, people who contributed. I still sit on the National Advisory Board for there. And it's funny how we look at equity on the East Coast versus how we look at equity in the Midwest, right? Everywhere you go, these people will look at equity different. In Illinois, I think with cultivation specifically, you can't say this is an equitable program. Yes, for market participation in the craft atmosphere, but there's no craft MSOs. So there's no equity with 14,000 versus 200,000 versus unlimited for metal, right? Now, equity would be, okay, everybody who have a cultivation, I'll give you +1, right? I'll give you the ability to grow medical, right? Now that's equity unlimited, right? You go from 14,000 to unlimited. Now that's equity, right? Because you're giving a craft grower, social equity person the same opportunity you gave the MSO. That's equity.
Yeah.
Difference in equity.
Yeah.
So I know why you put the word social in front of it now. So you can say, oh, we're looking for social equity, not market equity for you guys, right? The market equity would be,
yeah,
all of these licenses have to go to a particular group of folks, right? That's equity. The state would invest in them. That's equity, right? Your state investing in you. That's equity. So I think we just all mixed up the word with the word equity is versus restorative justice. That was restorative justice. That's what expungement was, restorative justice.
I agree. I want to say I agree with you on, I think, both points. The social equity part, like, we obviously didn't address that for the reasons we just talked about, the possession limits, the fact that they still exist, the fact that people can't cultivate. Like, that means that in those ways, if you wanted to say that was an effort to address social equity, in my opinion, that is an abject failure. Now, when you switch over to like equity for licensing, I mean, the question is open on as to whether that was the way it was meant to be. And that's where I just like, I want to return to the topic of limited licenses again briefly. Like, I really think that that policy point is the reason that we're having this issue. And like, some of the people that we've talked about in this show and that are operators in the state, frankly, say that they support limited licenses because they're attractive investment opportunities. And like, I mean, I get it. I mean, it's simple economics, and I'm not an economist, by the way. Like, if there are less people selling it and you're one of the limited few that can, you can set the prices at whatever you want. And I mean, yeah, you're the only one that's legally making money. It's not like rocket science by any means.
Now that's equity too. One of the things I think, but go ahead, finish up your point.
Well, that was kind of it. I was going to show like a brief video. It's like a 1-minute video to kind of cap off my point, but I do want to hear like because it sounds like what you were about to say is that the limited licenses are that form of equity, right? Or sorry, yes, I don't mean to complete your thought.
But yeah, so that limited form of licensing is that form of equity, right? Because you got to remember the MSOs had a market share that guaranteed the average dispensary earned this amount of money, right? So if you just open the licenses up without making them limited, then no license would have been able to have the opportunity to do the numbers that the current MSOs was doing in this market, right? And it had created a situation with some other things, but particularly to the point of equity in that, right? If you limited the license, so now you get them a good valuation. I think what folks get lost in translation with equity is, particularly from the government side, I heard this misstated so many times. Well, it's not equity if they sell the license. Oh, okay, well, define equity for me.
Yeah, I mean, I heard some license holders.
You say generational wealth.
Right.
You say it's not generational wealth.
Right.
So tell me what you mean. It's not generational wealth. If I can take a person from public housing, low income housing, who had weed charges, right? Who are making $50,000 a year, or a veteran, whoever won in the first round, I can take any of them license holders and say, look, this license holder owns 51% of this license, which is valued at $5 million, right? That means they're going to get at least $2.5 million or better, right? If they went from the year before, their tax records show that they made 70,000, 50,000, however much money they made, and the next year tax returns show an increase from 50,000 to 2 million, that's equity. That's creating, a financial change, right? Now,
Yeah.
what they do with that money, the $2.5 million, well, that's not enough to have generational wealth. If they invested in the right area, it is. And cannabis would have created that opportunity by their ability to sell that license.
Yeah.
I was afraid, just real quick, I was afraid that the state was going to set itself up for another lawsuit. You had, what's the joint on Ogden and Western? Perry used to own that one. He sold it. THC
Yeah.
dispensary. He
Yep.
sold it, right?
Yep.
How can you tell him he have a right to sell his license, but the social equity folks don't? Cresco GTI is a publicly traded company. They're allowed to take investors, shareholders, and all of this,
Right.
right? To continually to fund their business, but you're going to deny social equity folks, and who cannot go to a bank and get a traditional loan, by the way,
Mhm.
right? Because they come from a disproportionately impacted area, that probably would tell you that the per capita households aren't going to be your traditional investors. So they don't have a network with that network to get the capital in to stand up their business. You follow me? So they're
Yes.
only going to be limited to a certain pool of people with money, who's going to more than 95% of the time is going to be a non-Black or Latino, a person of color, if they wish, that this license would keep be in the hands of. Where's the 99% white industry? We wanted to do this to make sure we got more minorities and people of colors in this industry. Okay, how do you propose to do that? Just with a license?
I mean,
One of the things I noticed the MSOs was good at, Cole, real quick, was borrowing up all the goddamn money, man. They started borrowing more money in 2019,
right.
2018, before this was legal, right? And they was using that money to acquire real estate in areas they knew that dispensaries and cultivation facilities to go. They were very smart, bro. Right? Again, market manipulation.
Hmm.
That's why I feel like our government, that we talk equity, but you got to show it to me. I've been out there 3 years trying to advocate with them. Hey, let's work with our land bank, right? The government, the state Illinois government can create a industrial revenue bond, a commercial blight reduction bill, right? Let's say if you go into these communities where automation and cause factories to close down, and you got these industrial corridors throughout the state that are blighted and vacant. Let's repurpose this, right, by creating an industrial revenue bond, one, or two, creating a fund for commercial blight reduction. I've done it before with IDA in the Cook County Land Bank,
Yeah.
right, to deal with blighted commercial corridors, right, and industrial corridors before it tanks the water like it did in Michigan, right? So I know that the state has the capacity to create, legislation that would assist social equity folks. Look, we give tax credit to Amazon, Walmart, Target, Boeing, Centerspace, all these big companies and corporations that come into Illinois to do business, right?
Yeah.
We give them big tax breaks. We create tax incentives and subsidies for them just in exchange for jobs and opportunity. But we're not getting creative like that for social equity license winners who want to create good jobs and opportunities, cultivation facilities. The average cultivation facility is going to hire 20 to 40 people. You know that, right?
Yeah. I mean, my thing, I guess, my huge issue with limited licenses, and maybe this is, if you noticed, I had an epiphany in the middle of what you were saying, but I'm glad that you finished your thought, because, like, I definitely agree with you. You know what I mean? But like my again, my issue and the kind of the epiphany that I had is the enforcement arm of limited licenses are the police. So I just had an unlicensed operator on my show. Let's call him that, because he doesn't have a license, but he sells weed in the state of Illinois, and he maybe uses some of the loopholes that you were referring to, and some other ones. If he gets caught, he goes to jail, and I guess that's my issue with limited licenses. It's like the enforcement arm continues to be the policies that got us here in the first place. And it just seems like if we want to address social equity, and I know we were just talking about this and you agreed with me, but I feel like until we do this, social equity is a failure. Until we cease the policies and enforcement patterns that created the harm in the first place. Like I've seen many people say, like, if we don't pass this legislation within the next 10 days, social equity is going to be a failure. I get what you guys are saying, but I feel like we didn't really address it in the first place. You know what I mean? Like the state always.
And I agree. We didn't address it in the front. I believe like we're doing now. And I got to see in the next 10 days, like in the next week or so. I believe that we can fix it as we go, which was ass backwards by my belief now. You know, by my belief system now, right? Because again, I was awarded a license in 2021, right? And I've been through more bullshit and red tape, right?
Right.
Just to take down a facility. Pardon my French.
No, it's all good.
And it's legislative.
But that's my issue,
right?
is that it feels like we're cutting off our nose to spite our face with these policies. Like, I feel like this process may have yielded a higher proportion of minority participation, which is what the state shows. They show data that proves that now, technically speaking, the number of people that have licenses in the state of Illinois, you know, that are people of color or just let's just say non-white, they outnumber for now, at least. Let's see if
now. It's not going to stay that way because people going to sell.
But again, right? I think to just finish the thought, like I think this process may have yielded a higher proportion of minority participation, but it's just doesn't seem impressive when you consider that we've only handed out less than 300 new licenses. Like you look at Oklahoma, you look at Oregon, and you look at Michigan. Yes, it may be tough, but like I've had Portia Mittens on. She's from Oregon, and she was actually an interesting situation because she was in a town that, kind of like you were talking about earlier, in Illinois, but again, this was in Oregon that I'm talking about. They limited the number of licenses that would be in the town. Of course, they can't limit the number in the state, right? That's out of their jurisdiction or whatever. Right. But so she was in a unique situation where she didn't have to like face competition like in her town. But I asked her, like, isn't it great to just be able to start up like that? Like it just seems like these policies, what they end up is all this red tape, everything you've gone through. And it's like, I just wonder if after you and others hopefully get what you need to be successful, I'm worried, like, what is the next group of people face? Are they going to have to go through all this whole same thing? You know what I mean?
So again, while I'm in the process of opening up my license, right, open up my business utilizing my license, I run a trade association. Again, I was very active in creating the 55 licenses, right? Adding the gunshot victim to that, right? Adding low-income SNAP benefactors, public housing, adding food deserts, adding low graduation rates, right? Really trying to hit the people at the bottom, right?
Yeah, and give people background what you're talking about really quick, because you're talking about you added that as a way to qualify.
Parameter for to qualify for the social equity. Correct. For the 55 round, the round of 55 that just closed on April 21st.
Right.
We advocated for that, right? Because I felt like in this process, even though I'm from public housing and there wasn't enough people from the low income community that got a chance to participate. And I know we added the veteran, that was cool. But the legislation said the people disproportionately impacted by the war on drugs. And if you know anything about Illinois and Chicago, most of the oversaturation of police happened in public housing and low-income communities, right? Most of the drug and gang convictions came from low-income communities, right?
Yeah.
Public housing. So I wanted to make sure we address that, the legislative intent of CRTA. And I can say the governor did a great job of doing that, right?
Yeah.
You know, but even to that point, I got resistance from people who had licenses that own dispensaries. They didn't want another 55 licenses, right?
Yeah.
And I began to see, to your point, why folks push for things like a limited license, because it become a group of folks who just think they're in the in crowd and then nobody else deserves an opportunity.
And I
I'm
want
always going to be an advocate. Like Cole, you Google me, Willie J.R. Fleming, cannabis, Willie J.R. Fleming, casinos. Folks was mad because Bally's coming back to Brittany Green, and I'm advocating for equity. I'm an equity
Mhm.
guy, so we want equity in everything. Any new industry, we want equity, right?
Right.
And folks like, you already got cannabis license. Why you care about casinos? Because why would I stop fighting for the people just because I
Yeah.
got some weed licenses, right? That make me a sellout. Ain't in my blood, right? So I'm gonna always advocate in this industry for the formal and informal market, right? On the local and federal level, right? To
Yeah.
bring folks home. I worked on First Step Act, Second Chance Act. So I'm always gonna advocate, right? I just think in Illinois, too many concessions are given with our state legislators, right? And
Yeah.
I don't get it because it's a super majority.
Right.
Fuck, you need it. Excuse my French.
No, you
What
can
do you
cut.
need it?
We can.
Like, what the fuck? Who ass you kissing? Who you trying to appease? You got a super majority, man.
Right.
The fucking motherfucker gonna do besides get mad? Your vote matters not. You know what I'm saying?
Hmm.
Yeah, I know that's your constituent on the other side of the aisle, my ass, right? Get the bill done like they would do if they was on the other side of that supermajority, right? They're gonna move legislation that fit their agenda and their constituents' agenda.
Yeah.
We're not doing that in the state of Illinois. I'm disheartened and disappointed, right?
Yeah.
Because this state needs money. Not a lot of new federal dollars coming into Illinois. I know that because I do a lot of national organizing.
Mhm.
We're going back to the 2019 budget federally and pre-COVID dollars, right? So the state have to create innovative ways and creative ways to address housing, education, public safety, and all of these things with their own revenue. For states that, and I was in DC saying, well, that shouldn't be hard for states that legalize casinos and cannabis. Their tax revenue, I've been checking, is off the chart. Like $500 million in tax revenue, bro.
Yeah.
Like, who y'all think y'all talking to? We're not stupid in Illinois. You can take $300 million of that tax revenue, put a bond on it, create a commercial blight reduction program, and help cultivation facilities stand up across Illinois, because they're going to create 30 to 40 plus jobs, good paying jobs, right? They're going to bring back to life these vacant and blighted communities where there's industrial corridors or factories not being used. Like, we can get creative. I just think the problem is we'll be doing it for the people at the bottom. And I mean this when I say this. We'll be doing it for social equity license holders who ain't going to contribute to your D2s and the multitude like the MSOs. I'm going to call a spade, right? These craft grower associations and dispensary owners, they ain't going to be making no political contribution. A lot of us don't want to have to hire a lobbyist, you know what I'm saying? Because we can't afford that right now. But we're going to create the same amount of jobs and opportunity that Target, Walmart, with a better pay scale. Why aren't we receiving the same innovative creation, right, of subsidies for social equity applicants? We swear as legislators and as a government, we want to see be successful. And this just ain't to the state, these are to the local municipalities, right? Why aren't we getting as creative for social equity cultivators and dispensaries as we did for the Targets, Walmart, and the Amazon?
Yeah. Yeah. And I want to be clear that when I talk about unlimited licenses, I do not, I kind of pair that with social equity still. I still think there should be like the idea that people that don't qualify, like there should still be that like list of like you help to contribute to. And if you qualify for that, then you would have access to this like fund, and non people that don't qualify, when they pay for a license, they have to pay into that fund, not only like when they apply, but like yearly, because
Yep.
like, I just feel like I'm all for giving a leg up to operations, to transfer wealth to disproportionately impacted communities. It just seems like this was, the wrong way to go about it. So I know we went a lot longer than maybe you had expected. Are you good on time? I wanted to close on.
I'm good. I'm good. I'm good.
Cool. I wanted to close on this like idea, going forward. I really hope that you guys bring it home and that you get the policies that would help you for success. Cause like you say, without the 14,000 square feet, like it's going to be really hard to survive in the industry. And, I'm glad that you brought up other policies like the odor of cannabis. Without that going away, the war on drugs continues. So we
It'll
need
continue.
policies like that to become to pass, to become law. And so I appreciate you like bringing those up, and I hope again that these policy points go forward. I wanted to ask you, going forward, one of the things that I felt during this push here, and hear me out on this, is that like there's a pretty vibrant cannabis community, but it feels like it's lacking in the same energy that we had pre-legalization. And I'm wondering how we can get that energy back. And I'm just wondering if in the future, and I know that you're not the driver of policy, but I know you're like very much involved, dude. And thank you, by the way, for your work and advocacy, because
Appreciate it.
it's in many more ways than just cannabis. You know what I mean? Like this is,
Right.
so, but yeah, I wondered if to get that energy, because it like seems like some of these proposals, you kind of have to like, let me just put it this way. I bet you if you went to a dispensary and you asked like 10 people in a row, they wouldn't even know the thing about 14,000 square feet. You know what I mean? Like just random people. So I'm wondering like how we get people that buy weed to get energy behind these proposals that would enable, operators. And it would probably be a conversation like, hey, if you support these measures, you're going to have more choices of good weed in here from people in your
That's
community.
one of the things. Exactly.
You know?
So we won't. My approach is a farmer approach. Because like I said, I benefited medically from cannabis.
Yeah.
So I want to deliver a product that's really going to benefit the consumer.
Mhm.
I've been fighting for people my whole life. I've been a team player. I'm with the rights of people. When I heard stuff about molded weed and it's bad, like it's a lot of this shit is garbage. Like it's a lot of garbage, but you don't have a choice. And they forcing garbage down your throat, right? And then so we like to educate the public to say, look, we want to put good weed, great weed on the shelf so you know the difference, right? One, and you're getting the best product, right? So 14,000 square feet is going to help us grow more product, give you a more diversified choice of what you buying and who you buying from, right? It's quality versus quantity. These 200,000 square foot and unlimited grows, it's about quantity, right? That's why you end up with molded wheat, because they ain't checking like that. We saying with a craft grow, you're gonna get the best product. And the more you do to push to help social equity folks, the more it's gonna benefit you as a consumer. So it's an ecosystem. I tell everybody this, from the owners to the consumers, be it the patient or the recreational smoker. It's an ecosystem. And it's a plant, that's supposed to spread love. Not all of what we got going on, right? It's a healing plant, right?
Yeah.
It's supposed to heal the situation, cure the problem, not add to it.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just believe, and I know for sure that when social equity folks enter this market full-fledged, then the state gonna see a reason probably to expand licensing, because they're gonna see a bunch of better products on the shelf out there, right? And consumers gonna have a wider choice. But you can't do that without contacting your state legislator and letting them know, like, get this omnibus bill done, agency over commission. We got a super majority. Shouldn't none be waiting for the veto session. It's nothing to discuss, right? You go with the will of the people, So yeah, I'm just praying that we get our 14,000 square feet, and that we can offer the state of Illinois some of the best bud they've seen yet. Because hands down, I know I got some of the best geneticists and growers. You know what I'm saying? I've been blessed. I got a great team.
Oh yeah, man. Well, I want to thank you again for your time. For folks that are listening, it's May 19th. That's the last day. You need to let your legislators know before then. You need to call them if you're listening to this right now. and let them know to support the Cannabis Omnibus Bill. Agency over commission is what Willie said, right?
Yeah, that's right. And JR, please. And then 14,000 square feet, uniform badging, allow dispensaries and owners of cannabis licenses to sell some of their equity for investment or do what they want with their license like everybody else. But I do got to ask you, man, if I can recommend one person you can bring on the show
Oh,
who
bro,
can give you that
hit me.
smoke. Everybody say he's the young mentee. He's JR times 10, young fire Jordan Melendez, man. The protege, like, he's a
Bro.
beast, bro.
I
He's
talk
a
to Jordan.
beast,
I talk to
man.
Jordan all the time. So yeah, we'll make it happen. No doubt.
And just letting the world know I ain't holding Jordan back. Let these legislators know and the world know the young fire coming at you, man. I give a big shout out to Jordan Melendez, Doug Kelly, Peter Contos, and them for holding us down in this space and all of our advocates. Shout out Felicia from Scene as well. So I appreciate you. Thanks, Colin. Again, thanks to Illinois. You know what I'm saying? For being that home base Bud podcast that ain't afraid to put that smoke on the show.
Fuck yeah,
That
JR.
real smoke.
Hell yeah,
Appreciate
bro.
you, bro.
Well, hey, just so you know, this platform's always open for you. You got my number now, so just let me know and I'll reach out to you for sure. So thank
I
you.
appreciate you. Definitely. And one more thing before I get off the show.
Yeah.
You got to get at the new mayor of Chicago, man. See where he stand on cannabis, man. Inquirer in Minds wants to know. He's a good guy, good friend of mine. But got to address the issue of cannabis in Chicago. We ready to get to it, man.
Hell yeah.
We need advocates from everywhere, not just the people, but our local politicians, county commissioners, aldermen, mayors. Y'all speak up to the state and let them know, get it right for social equity.
Well, with that, folks, once again, reach out to your local representatives and make sure they hear you. So take care, folks. We'll see you in the next episode.